Hi, and welcome back to the sixth in our series on the economics of foreign exchange and exchange rates. We're now going to start getting into some policy applications. The first one is going to be to look at the consequences of a buy local scheme. No matter where you live, at some time your government has probably had a buy local campaign. In other words, a campaign, usually in the media, telling citizens to buy stuff that's made in their country. Now, there are a variety of reasons claimed for this. For example, it's often claimed that buying local will increase employment, keep jobs in our country. Sometimes it's just stated that you should buy local because of nationalistic reasons. It's good, don't buy that overseas stuff. Sometimes there's a pretty little symbol to go along with the campaign, so you know that you're buying local. Even a special day where consumers should be buying the locally made stuff. In the United States, there's been a recent president who has campaigned on the basis of buy American. But what is the real effect of a buy local campaign? Does it actually increase local jobs? Does it actually increase local production? What happens? Let's have a look. Let's start with our usual diagram. Demand for Australian dollars, supply for Australian dollars going up, and we're going to look at the European to the Australian dollar exchange rate, and let's again say that the starting exchange rate is 0.66 of a euro to the Australian dollar. A buy local campaign tries to get people to buy fewer imports and buy locally made goods. But remember, imports are part of our supply of Australian dollars. So if a buy local campaign is successful, it will reduce the supply of Australian dollars. In other words, at every exchange rate, the supply curve for Australian dollars will shift back to the left, back to this new green supply curve here. At our original exchange rate of 0.66 euro to the Australian dollar, we will now have an excess demand for Australian dollars. The demand, or the amount people would like to buy of Australian dollars, will be out here, given by the blue demand curve, but the amount of Australian dollars people are willing to sell will be back here to the left, given by the green supply curve. An excess demand is going to push up the price of an Australian dollar, and as we've drawn it here, the new equilibrium exchange rate will be 0.7 euro to the Australian dollar. So in other words, the buy local campaign will push up the price of the Australian dollar or lead to an appreciation in the Australian dollar. And at this new equilibrium, there will also be a reduction in the amount or the quantity of Australian dollars bought and sold. Notice that the final change in the quantity of Australian dollars traded has come about from two particular sources. First, as the Australian dollar goes up, the quantity of Australian dollars that people want to buy goes down. In other words, we move back up along this blue demand curve. But also, as the exchange rate has gone up, the amount of Australian dollars that people would like to supply has also gone up. In other words, we've moved up this green supply curve, the supply curve after the buy local campaign has been put in place. So to understand the effect of a buy local campaign, we need to understand all of these changes. The buy local campaign has had three effects that we can see on our diagram. The first effect is a reduction in imports. The buy local campaign has worked. People buy fewer imports, buy more local products. That's given by the gap between the original and the green supply curve at the exchange rate of 0.66 euro to the Australian dollar, or by the difference between the original quantity of Australian dollars traded and the quantity of Australian dollars that would be supplied, that yellow dotted line, after the campaign is in place. But there's two other effects caused by the appreciation of the Australian dollar. The first is a reduction in the quantity of Australian dollars demanded. That reduction is due to a reduction of exports. As the Australian dollar appreciates in value, then our products become more expensive to people overseas, and they buy fewer of them. So our exports fall. The third effect is that there's been a movement along that new green supply curve, or an increase in the quantity of Australian dollars supplied. That reflects that at the new higher exchange rate, imports have become cheaper. So some of those people who said, let's buy local, perhaps they've changed their mind as they see that, in fact, imports are now dropped in price and look pretty attractive. Another way to summarise this is by our balance of payments identity. Remember that because the quantity of Australian dollars bought must equal the quantity of Australian dollars sold, then imports minus exports plus income payments minus income receipts plus foreign investment by Australia minus foreign investment in Australia must equal zero. It's an accounting identity. It's got to always hold. So if the Buy Australia campaign works and imports go up, then something else has to change. Now, a Buy Australian campaign, no obvious reason why it should affect foreign investment, no obvious reason why it should affect income payments or income receipts. So the only thing that can change is exports. And as we've discussed it here, what can happen is that a Buy Australian campaign can indeed reduce imports, but the likely side effect is it will reduce exports, quite likely by exactly the same amount. Notice that if this happens, well, nothing's happened to our balance of trade. Sure, imports have gone down, so have exports. There's no difference in the level of imports minus exports. They've gone down by the same amount. So if a buy local campaign's meant to affect the balance of trade, it's not worked. Has it increased jobs? That's more tricky. That depends. We've got fewer imports, but we also have fewer exports. So we've got more jobs in our import competing industries, but less in our export industries. Is that going to create jobs overall? Well, which industries employ more people? That depends on your country, what you import and what you export. So the Buy Local campaign is not going to improve the balance of trade and may improve jobs, but may reduce jobs. We don't know without looking specifically at the individual import and export sectors. Finally, I have concentrated here on the effect on exports. Some people might say, well, hang on. That appreciation in the Australian dollar caused by the Buy Local campaign, it may affect, say, foreign investment in Australia. Maybe that reduces rather than exports. Well, it's not clear that's any better. If foreign investment in Australia reduces, then that means less capital development in Australia and less jobs in the future. So again, even if the Buy Local campaign worked and improved the balance of trade in the short run, it may have a long run effect on economic growth and employment. So overall, I think it's a pretty bad idea. Thanks for listening. We'll do another policy next time.